Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is putting a hard deadline on her plan to clear the tent encampment from the area known as Mass and Cass, saying everything and everyone needs to be out by January 12th. City workers have started offering people their housing at one of the multiple city and hospital-run sites, including a 41-bed program at a hotel in Mission Hill, a 30-unit cluster of temporary cottages at Shattuck Hospital in Jamaica Plain, and a 60-unit vacant hotel near Mass and Cass, the last of which has gotten a whole lot of pushback from the neighborhood. But Wu also announced yesterday that additional medical resources will be made available at city-owned shelters so they can safely accept people struggling with addiction.
The vast majority of people currently at Mass and Cass do not want to be at Mass and Cass.
City officials say that of the nearly 150 people living in the tent encampment, 95% would be willing to leave with the right support, according to a recent survey. As for the remaining 5%, the mayor didn't address exactly how they'll handle people who refuse to leave, other than to say she'll work closely with public health and public safety officials.
This is about taking a bold, transformational approach, not to put a Band-Aid over a situation, but to get at underlying causes.
I'm joined now by the executive director of the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, and GBH News reporter Tori Bedford. Welcome to both of you. This is a topic we've all been covering for many years. I want to jump right in and take a look at the summary of Wu's plan to start the conversation. Her plan for Mass and Cass, which was announced today, has dozens of supportive housing placements, an aim to lower barriers to beds at existing shelters, existing encampment protocol for any remaining tents after January 12th, and the city will maintain a presence in the area. And Michelle Wu also, Mayor Wu, saying that she thinks the real story is that by January 12th, the city will have stacked up resources so everyone in need has a place to go and does not have to be at Mass Cass. Tori, you've been covering the story for GBH quite a bit. What's your takeaway from in your reaction to this new plan from Wu?
So one of the major sort of aspects of this that she emphasized over and over was that she really doesn't want a repeat of what we've seen in the past. And so obviously we had Operation Clean Sweep in 2019, where former Mayor Walsh cleared out the area and hundreds of people came and returned. There's a concentration of services there and people come and seek those services. There's also a sense of community that was built within that area, and a lot of people came seeking that. And so I think that she's had a lot of meetings with business owners and residents, and they've had a lot of complaints about public safety from a neighborhood perspective. And so she's factoring that into her decision to say, there will not be this concentration of encampments anymore. My first priority is to find housing for people before things get incredibly dangerously cold. That's already started to happen. And make sure that the neighborhood goes through changes in its dynamic as well. So that was something that she repeated. And I think the biggest question coming out of that was, how will you ensure that you can accommodate all of these different needs at the same time without repeating, mistakes that have been made by previous electeds in the past? I think during her most recent press conference where she revealed the details of this plan, she was asked about getting folks out of tents. She said there will be no more encampments after January 12th or January 13th. How will she be doing that? Will she be placing eviction notices on tents? Will people be threatened with arrest? And the answer is that people will still have to leave under threat of arrest. And, she said that it will be different because they're actually giving them reasonable places to go. Currently, they did a survey where over 90% of people living there have said they don't want to be there anymore. And so they're hoping to find transitional housing as a better solution rather than congregate shelter. But, it remains to be seen how it will actually work if and when people decide that they do want to stay in encampments.
Carol, my take on this is, obviously people don't want to be there. I live in that neighborhood, so I'm past there once or twice a day, and it's dangerous for everyone. I don't think that anyone's going to argue that it's safe for anyone. It's dangerous for the people who are there. It's dangerous for drivers. I have my landlord almost hit somebody not long ago who was in the street. But we live in a society where we can't force people into treatment, and we can't force people to do something that they really don't want to do. What's your reaction to Wu's plan? What's the ACLU reaction to her plan that she just presented?
All right, thank you, Sue. It's great to be here. You know, the ACLU and our coalition partners have made it clear from the very beginning that we need to take a public health, equity-centered approach to addressing the intersection of crises at Mass and Cass. And so we're really, we welcome Mayor Wu's proposal to take that kind of a public health and equity-centered approach, and specifically to take steps to actually create viable housing options for people. So the ACLU, you know, we're continuing to monitor the situation on the ground and to ensure that the promises are kept, that the proposed placements, particularly that they accommodate people who have disabilities and other medical issues. But I think this new framework that the mayor is talking about is really a welcome, and as she said, a transformational change.
Tori, there's been a number of swings and misses here since the bridge, the Long Island Bridge was closed and these services were moved. I think it's fair to say that mostly they were good intentioned, but always missed the mark. And I'm just wondering if you've spent a lot of time there on the ground talking to folks and being involved and talking with the community that is established there. I think it's important to note that this is not just a Boston problem. There are people there who have come from all over the country, not just all over Massachusetts, but as far away from New Jersey and Florida. Are you wondering why the state hasn't taken more of an approach, or the region or the federal government to take an approach to help with this challenge that we have to get these people services?
I was actually just looking for the specific number. I believe it's 26% are from outside of Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of the issue, I mean, I did reporting back when Long Island was open. Obviously, the shelter closed in 2014 because the bridge was no longer usable and the state said, okay, we can't use the shelter. And back then, people were kind of pushed out into the city. And so what I've been trying to track and monitor is what happens to people. How can they keep tabs on people? How can they ensure that people are safe? And how can they make sure that they're actually figuring out where these members of the community end up and that they're not in incredibly dangerous situations?
Yeah.
I think that obviously there's been a lot of collaboration in finding temporary housing from the Shattuck Hospital campus in Jamaica Plain. That's a state-led effort, and up to 30 people will be able to live there. They will also have different facilities that people can use who don't necessarily live there. I think there was some talk of shelters in Charlestown and Jamaica Plain and other neighborhoods. I do think there is an effort to spread things out, and I ultimately think that this initiative by Mayor Wu, the aim is that people who are in the population that is very sensitive, that intersection of, mental health needs plus substance use needs plus PTSD from being on the street for a long time, because every single day you're out there, I think that affects you. There's so much trauma. And so there is a community that really needs stabilization now. And then the goal is to move them onto a different area where they can find more permanent housing later. I think I just wanted to say historically about Long Island, Wu said that her staff was there recently assessing it to see if it could be used as a shelter. And I think a lot of the criticism about that, which the Wu administration had previously echoed, was that it was the same idea of pushing people out of sight, out of mind. So pushing people to an island or pushing people to a neighborhood that, was just kind of largely under-resourced in general. And so I think people don't want to see a repeat of that.
Carol, you and I are old enough to remember when people were regularly put into institutions against their will for treatment they didn't want, and there was a reaction to that. And I talk to a lot of folks who have family members struggling with addiction who think we've gone too far now, that it's too hard to get people at least into some treatment. What's your opinion on that? Where should we be working toward?
I think there has to be a balance between a public health and equity approach and also protecting people's due process rights. Like the government, you can't just arrest your way out of poverty or homelessness or substance use disorder or mental health. And I was really struck by Mayor Wu's comments earlier today when she spoke really personally about her own mother's mental health issues and the barriers that she faced because of that. So the fact that the mayor is actually framing this as both a personal and a political commitment to taking this public health and equity approach along with the due process protections is, I think, really healthy. And I think that's why we all need to come together, because when you take that kind of an approach, it really enhances public safety, not just for the people who are on the streets, but for everybody in the surrounding neighborhoods as well. And so I really think this is a step in the right direction, although of course, as the ACLU will continue to monitor it to make sure that the actual implementation matches the words.
Yeah, the idea of the court that was being held at the jail that was right there, that didn't turn out to work out so well. Again, another big swing and a miss with a good intention behind it. Tori, I just want to talk about the low threshold housing and treatment. A lot of folks say, well, why don't they just go to Pine Street, or why don't they just go somewhere? They're empty beds. Why aren't they there? You alluded to it about the treatment challenges that they have, but it's essential that people who are in crisis have some place that they can go that won't deny them access because they are in crisis.
These environments, I mean, it's a generalization. I think a lot of shelters do really try to do it right and make people feel respected, but there's a lot of issues of understaffing as well, which is something that Wu's administration is going to have to deal with. Getting folks who actually want to be there and have not been traumatized into insensitivity themselves, because a lot of people have said that in a shelter environment, they feel kind of violated. They don't have any privacy. Anytime they bring any possessions in, IDs, anything, it gets stolen. Security guards refuse to check the cameras. They will kick people out for defending themselves against attacks. I think that low threshold housing, obviously, it also includes people who are in active addiction. And so that's another barrier that prevents people from going into congregate shelter settings, because they feel like it's too difficult to detox in that environment. Often there are other barriers that prevent people from going into detox. And you mentioned being old enough to remember when people were involuntarily committed. Obviously, that still happens. It happened after the jail court. I know you mean something slightly different, but there was research from the state from 2016 that showed that people who are involuntarily committed or involuntarily put into treatment, they are 2.2 times more likely to die from an overdose than those who choose to go in. So
right,
it really does make
for a myriad of reasons that come from that. Well, I appreciate both of you and your expertise. The ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, and GBH's Tori Bedford. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.